we're really facing a lot of challenges around faculty burnout, faculty leaving, and just plain exhaustion.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski, your host from Johns Hopkins. Today is one of our reunion episodes with my friend and colleague, Amanda Termuhlen from Minnesota. Mandy, hi again.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me back.
Well, of course, I was looking back in my notes, and Mandy and I talked back in April of 2019. So we're over 2.5 years ago. Dr. Termuhlen was episode number 20. So if you're going to go to the facultyfactory.org website, you have to go back to number 20 and check out. These episodes are timeless. And Mandy talked a lot about her office, how the office was set up. She talked about the dean's task force, how she first got in faculty affairs and gender equity. And she did the ELAM program. Talked about the future history of your career, all kind of really cool things and what keeps you up at night, professionalism, disruptive behavior, gender equity, so many interesting things. They're 2-minute tips for chairs. But when I asked, Mandy I'm happy to come back and share some more wisdom on what's been going on in Minnesota. So Mandy, why don't you please start by telling everybody your title and your role at Minnesota, and let's just launch into it.
Thank you, Kim. So I am the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs at the University of Minnesota Medical School, and I am a professor in the Department of Pediatrics. And it's been quite two plus years since we last talked.
No kidding.
Yeah. So hearing you talk about all those things, we talked about back then, I was in the job less than a year when we did that podcast, and everything was exciting and new and, tons of stuff going on. And then, of course, March of 2020 hit. And then May of 2020 hit, which in Minneapolis was a very profound time for our faculty, staff, and our students with the murder of George Floyd. So it's been quite a year. In Minnesota, we would call this an interesting year or two. And yeah, I'd love to just tell you what's been going on.
Oh, please do. I mean, this again speaks to the fact that these issues are timeless. So what I love about these conversations, what I love about the community that you are all building, that we are all together in this, is that these aren't things that just happen in a city or an institution and we go, oh, that's interesting, that's an anomaly, that we can all relate to these things, that we are all woven together in both the global pandemic and this, horrific murder. So yeah, let's just get into it. I know the listeners want to hear the impacts of this at the leadership level, someone like you, at what you're observing with the faculty level, and then obviously some words of encouragement, wisdom, inspiration for people to go, all right, what are you doing in Minnesota? How are you seeing that we're going to get through this?
Yes. So I'll say out front, I am still incredibly optimistic and excited and thrilled to be doing this work, because I think as a faculty affairs administrator and person, I think we can have profound impact on our institutions, on the institutional leadership, on our faculty members. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So when the pandemic hit in March of 20, I still have the date of the first patient embedded in my brain, March 6th. And we went through the acute situation, as did every other medical school and health system in the country. How do we manage this? What do we do? What do our staff do? What are the risks? How do we help our frontline workers? And I think back then, our Dean Toller, did something which I think profoundly helped us at the University of Minnesota. And that was, he decided that we were going to go independent of supply chain. So we made reagents. We did our PCR testing. I clearly remember the day the head of our lab, Dr. Sophia Yogi, said, Okay, we ran 17 samples last night. We ran 42 samples last night. And then now, of course, and within months, we were doing tens and tens of thousands of samples. So we really built it from scratch. Masks, low-cost ventilators, which fortunately we did not have to use, but became available for other countries, and protective gear. And so I think that gave us hope that, these are things that we can tap into our expertise and our innovation, and we can actually make a difference for not only the patients that we were caring for in Minnesota, but also for patients elsewhere throughout the country and the world. So that was a good, I think, foundational start to the pandemic.
Now, a question just before we launch into this, because I'm just kind of curious, do you know how Dean Toller came to this decision about going independent of supply chain? Did he anticipate or know that this is going to be a tough road to hoe and we're going to be on our own, so let's just do this right now? I mean, how is he so quick to say, all right, everybody, we're turning into the Keebler Elves shop, we're doing it all our own?
I think it was the feedback he was getting through, our Department of Pathology, lab medicine, that reagents were in short supply, that we were having trouble getting swabs, that, things just weren't where you would expect they would be. And so instead of being at the mercy of others, took the step that, we're going to figure out how to do this. And just funny story, not funny, but funny. We're the home of the National Maradona program, right? They have swabs. We use swabs from them when swabs ran out. I mean, it was just like this. We're going to get this done one way or the other to take care of our patients. So it was great insight. It was great perception, and I think it really helped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So from a faculty standpoint, of course, labs are shut down. Teaching is totally flipped to remote. And very early on, there was concern about, what is going to happen to faculty careers in all this. And we very early in this process, working with all the associate deans across the university and the provost office, decided to do an automatic 1-year tenure clock extension. People didn't have to take the time to apply. People didn't have to review it. People didn't have to take it if they don't want to, but they got 1 extra year on the tenure clock. And that was, I think, a statement to say, we get it. This is probably going to be long, and we're going to do what we can. And we did get pushback on, well, this is going to impact women or those underrepresented in medicine, because if they were due to get promoted, they get this extra time. They're going to take a long-term salary cut and all this. But it really, the benefit of getting everyone that 1 year that they could use if they needed it greatly outweighed, I think, the criticism of doing that. So we did that. Our Department of Psychiatry developed a pandemic, we called it a pandemic plus years 2020, 2021, self-assessment tool. How did your workload change? Quantify it. What is your teaching effort? If it was 40% pre-pandemic and you had to redo everything for online, what is it now? There were sections in all missions that people could just use themselves to remember and to really think through all the impacts. And then we had one for your personal impact, illness, children being educated at home, taking care of elderly relatives, so people at least felt like they had something they could sit and document the impact that this had on them. And then they could use that if they chose to go into a COVID impact statement when they did their annual reviews or their promotion and tenure dossiers, or they didn't have to. It really was up to the faculty to decide if they wanted to use this or not. The provost really encouraged people to do that. But I will say in the 2 cycles of promotion I've had since then, most people have not done that. They've indicated they've had impact, but they haven't really had to go into a lot of detail about it. We revised our annual review forms. Our forms are very much, what were your goals last year? Did you meet your goals? If you didn't, then the supervising department chair or division chief would write, here's what here's what we want you to do for next year. And we said, no, here were your goals from last year. Did you meet your goals? Yes or no? If no, was it due to the pandemic or the social unrest that we experienced in Minneapolis during that year. And if they said yes, then they didn't have to go through a detailed like improvement plan or anything. It was just like, yes, done.
Period.
And if it was no, then the chair or division chief could be like, okay, here's what we need to help and move things along. We also we found both from the pandemic and from George, all the impacts of George Floyd's murder, faculty were really called on to do a lot more service work, a lot more community outreach, a lot more diversity, equity, inclusion work. So the service lift that faculty was going through, A, because they were passionate about it and they wanted to do it, or B, we just needed it. We needed the help to do this work in response to our students and our staff and other faculty members. We added actually data around what is it that you're doing in this space. Tell us, what have you done? Tell us what % of your effort is spent doing this time, which is not anything we had ever collected before. Yeah. We collected, % time research, % time clinical, % time administrative, % time education. And we expanded that to % time service, educational service, diversity, equity, inclusion service, community engagement service, so that at least we could capture what people were doing so that eventually we can move that into some credit for promotion and tenure. So we tried to do, just in terms of the faculty fear that I'm not going to be able to advance through this. We tried to do as much as a system, as a medical school, to let them know that, yeah, we understand, and we're going to give you, every opportunity to continue your advancement with as much support as we can. But you can tell us your story, and you can build that into your narrative, going forward with promotion.
I love the yes/no question of were any of this reduction or change in expectations or productivity due to the pandemic or George Floyd? Yes or no? Yes, no. And then not requiring the justification of explain or describe. That's really interesting to me because we have struggled with some pushback from faculty saying, is this going to be used against us at some point in the future? If I say, well, I couldn't produce the deliverables on my grant, I didn't see the patients, the papers weren't getting presented, I wasn't getting these speaking engagements, I was taking care of my children because the schools closed. So all these things that happen, some people are like, I don't know that I want to put that in a narrative and then have someone yank that out of a file later when it comes time to renew my term or my contract, and they say, well, you seem to have all these, you're one of these faculty who has all these excuses or challenges. So that is something I never even considered, just saying yes or no. Yes, it did. All right, move on. I think that is really, it's just so elegant in its simplicity that I think sometimes we always try to collect data, get more information, but sometimes we don't. Why is it necessary? Why are you going? Why? What would be the purpose then? I'm trying to think. You're making me think in a different way of putting a faculty member through all that detail of all the layers and layers and layers that maybe is covered in your psych departments, that self-assessment tools, and for personal health. But why do that unless, now I'm playing devil's advocate with myself, is 3-5 years from now, am I going to forget like why I didn't get that paper presented or why those experiments weren't run because people in the lab like quit? I mean, I don't know. That to me is, I just love that elegant solution of yes, no.
And that's why we encourage the faculty to do the self-assessments just for themselves, because I had the fear that people would black it out, right? You forget how much this actually impacted you every single day. So we encourage faculty to document for themselves, and we encourage them to, and again, same concern, I don't want this information out there, but we all know there was impact, and just put it in a drawer somewhere. And that way, when you are ready to go for a promotion, you can just reflect back on it and think, oh yeah. And then maybe in your narrative statement for your promotion, you may say, I went through this and look what I did now. So it's and it's very much up to the faculty whether they want to do this in a way to share it with their division chief or not, their department chair or not, in their dossier or not. It really is. But we did have the fear that people would forget. And so when we changed the annual review forms, we said, this is what the annual review form is going to look like for the next 5 years, because we know that this is going to have long-standing impact. We knew it when it started, that it would be long-term. So we've built it in so that in 5 years, we'll say, okay, do we still need this? Do we not need this? And we'll take a look at it again. But yeah, I think, it helped reassure people that, yes, there's still a way forward through this.
And in addition to this whole service lift idea that, wow, what an opportunity. We've always known, because faculty who are in academic medicine have big hearts and they do feel a real connection to the communities that we serve and want to give. And I think a lot of our faculty want to give and serve and volunteer even more. And yet they do the calculation of the cost benefit of, I would be doing more in my community. I would love to be engaged and involved. And yet I'm being held to this RVU ticker that's just going. And the grant machine and the paper machine. And oh, by the way, I have a young family at home. And oh, by the way, there's a pandemic. And there's this, and all this, the horror around tension in the city. So the fact that you in Minnesota put out this new way to calculate what percent effort, documenting the service, the community outreach, measuring it, this is something that's going to be definitely sustainable for the future. I bet you that would be, once you've institutionalized that and it's counted as real versus just like an other, it gets shoved into another category and people know it's just more uncompensated effort. It's not going to count. Might be nice, but maybe when I'm a tenured professor, I'll do that. Do it now and get credit for it now. So I think that's another brilliant way to acknowledge and value and really put your money where your mouth is and saying, no, this is part of our mission. This is who we are. We do this and we know you're doing it and we see it and we appreciate it and it counts. So good for you.
So now we're working on getting that into the promotion and tenure guidelines, and everything takes time. But that's the idea. At least we'll have some baseline data and some awareness of what faculty are doing and all their contributions in these areas. And we can build the promotion guidelines to provide that value. Many of these things, as you said, are unpaid, but there is value in giving people credit for the work they're doing as they advance in their careers.
What is your sense of the gender and equity, and what is the temperature in Minnesota right now with faculty and hopefulness, if you will, for the future? I kind of feel like I vacillate here in Baltimore I get this sense that faculty are really engaged. Our faculty senate, we have junior faculty advisory council. We've got a faculty affairs and development board of all leaders in the departments who have the titles of vice chair for research, vice chair for faculty affairs, vice chair for faculty development and thus and such. And everybody seems to really be like, come on, we got to do something. It's almost like that really there's a lot of pent up energy we got to make some changes. So, and I'm wondering if that's just kind of like a little blip, that this is in a response to feeling helpless and hopeless for so long. Or is this just kind of a cyclical thing or maybe it's just my perspective? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious. Are you observing anything that's kind of making you go, huh?
What I'm observing is exhaustion. So I think we had the acute phase of the pandemic. We had the acute social unrest around George Floyd. We settled into a kind of a COVID fatigue kind of mode. Things were clinically, the system was under control. We did some brainstorming sessions, kind of listening sessions on steroids, about what, in that early phase, what do you need? Flexibility, child elder care, technical help to work at home. I need a culture that supports how flexible I am in my meeting times and my response to email. I need certain kinds of communication, but flexibility was definitely number one. And I think we kind of hung in this tired but optimistic phase, I think, for most of this of 2021 going into this fall. This fall, we are again in surge mode. We have been high number of cases, clinical system at the very upper edge of capacity, burnout, attrition, lack of staff. We're down 20 to 30% in nursing and other roles that help support the infrastructure of our clinical. So right now the temperature is exhausted. It's very worrisome. And so the things that we had done to support, we had pulled in extra mental health resources. We started with a battle buddy, a buddy system for frontline providers. We moved into mental health consultants embedded in departments to triage. And that all got better over the summer and, through this year. And now we're really facing a lot of challenges around faculty burnout, faculty leaving, and just plain exhaustion.
How do we see our way through this? Is this just something that it's the battle weariness, and I'm just kind of harkening back to old war movies? Is this, and just picturing our courageous military men and women just sitting there tired and sweaty and dirty and exhausted and injured and just in despair. And then what happens? They come home and we just kind of love them up, and then they go back out there. I'm just trying to, where do we see, what can we do, or what can we hope for? What, we're both optimists, and what can we rest assured knowing that what?
I think it's a great question. I think there are things we can do. We have been working, our clinical system has been working, overtime on staffing and hiring and getting people the support they need. I think we're going to have to bring back more of our mental health supports. Absolutely. But it's a different kind of support. So looking forward at 2022, I think it's going to be the year of, and again, just my personal opinion, how do we just help people get through this? It's trauma. It's like chronic trauma. How do we help them get through it? How do we keep them in academic medicine as opposed to leaving? That's a huge effort to undertake. It's very, parts are personal and parts are systems. And when the clinical systems are stressed, everyone's stressed. Mm-hmm. So I think that looking forward, 2022 is going to be our how do we keep our faculty wellness at the center of all these other things that we're doing. And it's going to be really hard.
And I can't help but just think that, when times get like this and you're saying, chronic trauma, I can't help but think, and this is when we have to remind our dear faculty that, you came into academic medicine for a reason. It wasn't obviously to get wealthy because you would have chosen private practice. It was because you're curious, you want to discover, and you're all about knowledge and innovating and curing and treating and diagnosing. But that curiosity and that scientific mind about the scientific method is what drives them. And I can't help but thinking, if we could just make that side of the work easier, it's one thing to have, if all this is going to be super, super hard in my life, if somebody throw me a bone, make something else easier to balance it out instead of everything being so hard. So if we know that, you're going to go to work today making widgets, and that 10 to 11 hour is going to be cuckoo crazy pants. Let's really make the 9 to 10 o'clock hour and the 1 to 4 a lot better. So it seems to me, if we could just offload some of the other stuff that reminds people, oh, that's right, this is cool. Doing science is cool. Making and inventing new things and discovering things. That is why I did this. And you get lost in that moment and in that flow. So if we can get faculty to get back there and loving that and enjoying that, I think that would be just enough. Was it Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, or who did the Man's Search for Meaning? Was it, remember the war prisoners of war, who said it's not as long as you have a why, the how will work itself out. So if like there's a why, there's a reason why I know I'm in academic medicine. It's in my heart. It's written on in my guts. I am to be here. The how is just, we got to figure this out, but I know why. Knowing the why, and it's because I'm a scientist, that I'm meant to be here. So if we could just do something to help make that easy, they can maybe tolerate the horror if you've got some other reason to do it. So, Mandy, how are we going to do it?
Yeah. So, there's good news, right? Our labs are open.
Yes.
Everyone's up and running. Our students are all, they came out of clinical service role. They're all back in. Our residents are, they're obviously working really, really hard, but our residencies are all up and going. Our faculty are, we've opened up, I think, to collaborations. We have 2 campuses. We have a Twin Cities campus and a Duluth campus. And there was always this tension around, Duluth may not be aware of everything that's going on in the Twin Cities. Well, now everyone's remote, right? So all those barriers have gone because now we are literally all connected. Mm-hmm. And it's opened the door for some really new and innovative collaborations. We were under a hiring freeze. We're now out of hiring freeze, which will help in terms of faculty. That will help immensely. The health system are bringing in people to work. So I do see an end to it. It's how do we help our people, one, manage the day-to-day that they see and the day-to-day of their work, and what are the things that we can do to make their lives easier, versus, yes, we are going to get out of this. At some point, this will be better controlled, but how do we have the faculty handle all that trauma that they've experienced over the couple of years? Right. So it's getting through day to day, and then how do we? I don't even know a good word for it. Optimize seems too glossy, but how do we actually concretely help people manage everything they've been through? Yeah, and that's basic science, all the way to our most prominent clinicians. Right. Everyone's impacted. So right. Those are the challenges. And
I'm confident that our faculty, people listening to this podcast right now, they're going to fix this. So like we, as we look to the younger generations and the mid-career faculty and the early career faculty, I feel like they know what's going. If we listen to them, and they're going to lead us, like every successive generation, right? They're going to help shine the light there. So I think you're exactly right that it's people like us who've been in the game for a while. If we can just exude this sense of non-anxious presence, we're not going to cherry coat this and make sure, it's all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. We understand and appreciate this chronic trauma that you're talking about. And we're here for you. It's one person at a time. It's one heart seeing another heart, and eyes meeting eyes, a nod to another nod. We've got each other. We got to lift each other up, and we're going to get through it. And you're right. There have been so many positive things that have come out of this, and this connectivity. And the next generation, they're going to figure this out, and we're going to yeah, we're close. I think we are. I'm like you. I share a lot of hope that it's that we're going to get through it, as long as we can just, I think, reminding people, you were drawn to this field for a reason, and it's tough, and we know it. We'll never forget this time, and the great things will come of it. I'm sure.
And I am really thrilled, excited to see, the AAMC, I think, release their number of applicants to medical school, and it's up. And the applicants are a much more diverse group of applicants. And that makes me very excited because there is hope. There is absolutely hope for the future of academic medicine. It's tough. This is a very trying time. This is not something any of us planned on. But I think faculty, and I really leaned on my other faculty affairs colleagues, and how are you doing this? What are you doing? How are you? To really help each other and to help each other learn and share and help all of our faculty. So I really appreciate you doing this podcast. I think this is absolutely terrific.
Well, Dr. Termuhlen, this has been great. I'm happy to see you. I'm so glad I'm on Zoom now, because seeing familiar faces, you're right, that we have to always remember that we're not alone. And then even times, I think I said on prior podcasts, when life gets tough and you look at your calendar and you think, oh, I have all these things to do, all these meetings, all this whatnot. And then invariably, every time within 5 minutes of my seeing a face that is familiar to me and that is smiling and hearing me, and we're talking, it's like, oh my gosh, this is right. I'm happier now. It makes me feel good, and we're sharing ideas, and yeah, we're doing what we need to be doing. It can be frustrating, and I get frustrated because I feel a little bit like I'm not doing enough. But having faith and confidence that it's not all on us either. I mean, we can't expect our faculty to shoulder all the burdens of everything, but I'll let you close off, Mandy, with anything you'd like to end our conversation with.
I just want to thank you for doing this. I think the sharing, this is the part of the past couple of years I personally have missed. I think many of us in faculty affairs have missed. And I really thank you for doing this. Thank you.
Well, everybody, this was, you've been listening to a conversation with Dr. Amanda Termuhlen at University of Minnesota. You're on the Faculty Factory podcast, which episodes drop every Friday now we're starting our year 4. So if you have a question that you'd like us to answer and invite a leader to talk about that topic, or you want to be on the podcast, or you have a friend who wants to be on the podcast, or you know somebody who should be on the podcast, just send me an email at facultyfactorykim@gmail.com. That's facultyfactorykim@gmail.com, or go to facultyfactory.org. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Thanks, Mandy. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more. Get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.